We are live streaming.
Yep.
We are, and commence the meeting. Thank you for a great turnout and welcome. So, let me get my running instructions here. Just like to recognise whether we have anybody on Zoom or we're all here. Nobby, it's great to see you. Normally it's being by Zoom. It's tremendous. Thank you. You're with us, and I hope all's well. So right, we're into it. So do we have any apologies? People say the course of the meeting, it's set through 11, but we're recognising we'll probably go over just a tad, although I've been told we must finish by 12, so that's fine. Are there any matters in front of us that you have concerns about your interests? Being none, I haven't been informed of public or anybody wishing to speak at the public forum. Change in order. Now I must confess I haven't quite caught up with this. Agenda item 8, which is our annual report update, is to be moved up until I think straight after the minutes, because we have Derek, our auditor, with us, Derek Olsen. So we will deal with that very quickly after we've dealt with the minutes. And indeed, acknowledging that Derek is there. Derek, can you hear us, by the way?
No.
Oh, okay. Rightio. No, just so that he can be ready to go.
Yeah.
And I think Jenna probably is also joining.
Jenna can't make it.
Oh, Jenna can't make it. She's an apology. So we've got Derek. Derek, can you hear us? Okay. Those are the only agenda items I have. Changes I have to the agenda. Nobody. I don't think there's anything else that we need to note at this stage. Right. Let's just, while we're getting Derek admitted to the room, can we just look at the first item, which is the minutes from last meeting? I'll move from the chair that they're accepted as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Any matters of accuracy or comment people need to recognise? Just being slightly picky here, can we just get the numbers right, please, on was it page 13, where we try and take, is it 50 million, derive our net debt number, $87 million less 50, giving us $38 million in net debt. I think it's 37 should be the number. That's on page 13, Malavika, of the agenda, and one always looks at what one says or is reported to have said, and I just noted the importance to approve the draft annual report in September. Can we say at the end of that, an effective recommendations consistent with a letter of representation, please, rather than made through a letter? That gets that fine. Brilliant. Anything? Oh, and there are a couple of actions I'll follow up on, but if nobody else has got any comments on it, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Good. Right, can I just check a couple of action items? One of them was that actually under that item on page 815, Ross and I were charged with working with Patricia and her team and with Derek and his team on a monthly basis to seek a collaborative approach to getting to our audit work. We are doing that. Ross, in particular, I was an apology met, was it last Friday? I think, Ross, so that's going, which is fine. Claire, there was one thing I noted on the action item, which was you and me, on page 16, which recommends that we write to Audit New Zealand and advise them that it is the Council's intention to, do we need to do that? We've resolved it, but I'm wondering whether we need to do it.
I'm sure that we can advise the auditor in his.
I think we can do that. Okay, good. So that's just the outstanding item. So look, with that, can we then move on, please, having brought forward item 8, which is the 2022 annual report. And Derek, this time, check that we've got you online and can hear you. Good morning, Derek.
Morning, Bruce.
Great to see you, Derek. That's superb. So we can move to item 8, please, which is indeed the annual audit. Patricia, is anything that you want to say introducing this, or will we cut across to Derek?
Well, I'll just take it as read, and I think we cut across to Derek because the the critical part is the audit plan from Audit New Zealand for this audit, and then I can tie up any of the administration things from our side at the end.
Yes, we'll circle back particularly to the dates, which I think is probably critical from the perspective of where we're at the moment. Okay, Derek, welcome to the meeting. Thank you for being available this morning. Look, can you give us a heads up, please, on your plan?
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Patricia, and good morning, committee members. Yes, I'm thankful for the opportunity then also to present our audit plan for this year's audit. I'll just highlight some key areas from this audit plan as I also do take it as being read. I probably just want to highlight some of the key risks that we've outlined in terms of what our focus areas will be. We've had engagements with management, and we believe these are the key areas to focus on for this year's audit. First is probably the revaluation of property, plant and equipment. This was an area that I think had a lot of attention last year, and again this year management has decided and council has decided to revalue all assets, all property, plant and equipment. So again, this will be a big focus for our audit this year, ensuring that the carrying value of assets do represent the fair market value. Again, we'll have quite a few discussions with the respective valuers, ensuring we get a full understanding of market conditions so that the carrying value do represent fair value. Also, what we've identified around investment property, we've increased our scope this year around investment property. Last year we only looked at the fair value and valuation of investment properties, where this year we'll be doing a more fulsome approach around investment properties, looking at the full cycle of investment properties, also selecting some of sales of investment properties during the year. We'll look at the operational effectiveness of how investment properties are brought into account. So there is quite a increase in the scope around investment properties. Also, just software as a service. This is something new that's also coming into effect, where council will probably be engaging and entering into significant cloud computing arrangements in the near future. So we'll also just be looking at that and ensuring that that is dealt with appropriately from an accounting and financial reporting perspective. So those are maybe the three areas from a risk perspective that I wanted to highlight. Also, just maybe to note, we have included some additional focus areas. Those are focus areas that normally comes through from a sector perspective. So these are areas that we'll be looking at for all councils across the country. And they are also included in the Auditor General's audit brief. So there's an expectation from the Auditor General also that we look at those respective areas across the sector. Also, I've highlighted in the audit plan from a group perspective, what are the areas we'll be focusing on when one looks at the group. ICHL being the only significant group for council. ICHL and group does have its own subsidiaries, and those all feed into council's financials through the group accounting. So we are engaging with the appointed auditor on those respective entities, also to get a full understanding of the impacts that this will have on group reporting. Also, maybe just to highlight, we do include in our audit plan our materiality threshold. For this year, we've set it again at, from a council perspective, at 60 million, with a specific materiality at 2.35 million. And then maybe just the only other thing that I want to highlight is maybe just around the timing of the audit. As you are aware, last year Parliament granted an extension to reporting deadlines for various sectors and entities, whereby councils had their deadline extended up until the 31st of December. That was for a 2-year period. We will still be utilizing the full extent of that extension that was granted last year. seeing that we are still building capacity and there is still an auditor shortage within the auditing profession and current environment as a result of COVID. And COVID again might still impact us during the audit process, as we've seen during the start of this year in some of our other clients, whereby there has been impacts due to staff being off and needing to isolate and various aspects emanating from COVID. So we will be utilizing the full extent of that extension, and in terms of the proposed timing to issue our audit opinion on the 20th of December. So Chair, maybe with that, I'll pause there for any questions.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate that. First, committee members, great to have Derek here. Is there any questions you'd like to raise with Derek? Yes, Rangi.
It's about the asset valuation. Obviously, I just want to get this straight, that because of the marketplace costs, we have to revalue our assets to make them align. Is that right? Because it's more expensive to do stuff. Is that right?
Actually, Councillor, this is the year that we would have been revaluing all our assets.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding there had been a significant
But do we
increase.
revalue them to current marketplace? You know,
Yes.
right. Okay, so that leads me to the next question. Then you can liken this to, say, domestic property. Now, the average homeowner's house would go up in price if building costs go up, because it makes sense. Okay, building costs drop per square metre, then obviously the value of existing houses would level out accordingly. I'm saying, so come a recession or anything, and the cost of doing business becomes cheaper, do we then revalue accordingly to the reduced market?
The answer is, let's just back the truck up. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Rangi, what we are doing is council has adopted and is required to adopt the concept of fair value. Okay, which is essentially a market valuation.
Yep.
The point is that most of our assets, the large asset base that we have, you can't do on a market basis. Okay, so a market basis with your house, your domestic house, would be essentially by reference to what? Recent sales. So it's, you don't value you don't value your house based on the cost to build. It's the market value if you're doing fair value.
Probably a bad analogy then.
Pardon?
Probably a bad analogy then.
Well, that's the analogy you gave. So the critical thing around our specialised assets is the use of what we call depreciated replacement cost, which gets you exactly back to that point. Theoretically, you're correct. If contract rates went down, arguably, there might be some form of devaluation of the.
That's what I'm asking.
But I'd like to say over the last 20 years that hasn't happened.
Right. Okay. I've just noticed that in our roading contracts and stuff, for example, we've a lot of the contracts have come in way under budget because they've told us it's the nature of the business at the moment. There's not much happening and stuff like that. So I guess roads are an asset, and that's an example, you know, of a fall in the market. And I just wondered, if there is a fall in the market, do we reevaluate? But obviously not.
Well, you would take things into account. So there are two things that we have had to do, and you'll recall with Derek last year, we had some challenges, which was around doing a fair value assessment. So what you are doing, if you are not going to revalue, which was not last year, we do what is called a fair value assessment to make certain that in your non-revaluation year, you shouldn't be revaluing or recognising some form of market adjustment. There was nothing. So that's when you would consider potentially those change in those contract or market rates, but I suspect they're not going to go down.
Right. No, that's answered it clearly.
Yeah, thank you. And look, it's important that we, you know, it's a difficult area, particularly given that I think with 3 Waters reform, this is something that we need to have on a reasonably accurate basis. So I do look forward to the fact that we've got to, dare I say it, revalue and get it right. Are there other questions? Thank you for that, Rangi. Yes, Nobby?
Yeah, just for Derek directly. Given the performance last year of Audit New Zealand and given your, inability to recruit enough auditors, which seems to be across the board, and the impacts of COVID, which haven't gone away, just wonder about the mindset of adding additional focuses that you've listed there, 3 waters, prudent expenditure, setting of rates, and integrity and ethics. And are you comfortable that you can deliver all that, which is, I guess, is extra work, given that last year we struggled a bit with the timeframes?
Yes, through you, Chair. Those are sector-specific requirements coming through from the Office of the Auditor General directly.
Okay.
So those need to be performed, I think, regardless. There has been some cutback on other areas that we haven't included in the plan, specifically taking that into account.
Yep, thank you.
Good, thank you. Yes, Ross.
I also support that the monthly meetings we're holding focus around about 4 key areas. One is timeliness, one's resources, technical issues, both accounting and others. So we're making sure there are no surprises, and on both sides there are resources and time issues, so we're well aware and can plan.
Yep.
So I think that's the assurance I'll give the committee that it's getting monitored more often than just every R&A update.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
The joint objective, Novi, is to get to, is it the 15th of December? I should actually be up to date. 20th December, happy is the word we're using, which means all these things are wrinkled out. So that'll be the challenge. But thank you. That's a good point, Novi. There is a lot that Derek has to do to complete his engagement. So it's a fair point. Any other questions for Derek? Can I just ask a couple, please, Derek? Probably it is in one of those areas of extra stuff. I noted the prudent expenditure decisions. I'd love us to be proved prudent. How do you go about that? Because it's more than sensitive expenditure. Can you give us an indication for the benefit of the committee what you're doing in the area of prudent expenditure decisions? This is on, I don't know what page it is of yours. It's page 6 of your report at 63 of our agendas.
Yeah, so Chair, I think in this area it's a lot to do with the processes and procedures that council have in place to ensure that they've got appropriate decision-making mechanisms in place for any decision that gets made. So it will be a lot of discussion with management. Besides, as you highlighted, the area of sensitive expenditure where we select specific transactions. Also, we do select transactions on a random basis to ensure that there's a level of unpredictability, so that any transaction that we do scrutinize or select and look at, we will have that prudent expenditure lens when we look at that specific transaction or item that we've selected.
Brilliant. That'll be good to see the results of that specifically. So that's great. Hey, just on the group stuff, thank you for including the group concerns with quite some detail in the plan. That's really helpful, Derek. I presume you and Chris, particularly where you're dealing with other parties that are undertaking the audits, that you are in early conversation with them about what are your risk assessments with each of those, and issue assessments with each of those subsidiaries.
Yes, Chair. So similarly as what I do by sending out group instructions to Chris for my expectations as the group auditor, similarly he will send out group instructions to each of the respective entities that he audits within the group. And I understand those have already gone out to the respective group entities.
So what if I could just get the committee to go back to page 55 of the agenda, and Patricia, probably key to just round back here on the timeline, which is quite extensive, but it also is reflecting, you're right, I don't know why I had 15th of December in my head. 20th of December is the date to actually adopt the annual report. It'd be a great Christmas present, Derek. Anything here that you need to raise with us at this stage, please, Patricia?
No, at this stage everything is on plan. So the audit team were actually down here in Invercargill last week and have completed the field work for the interim audit. So we're just waiting for that will be reported back at the next risk and assurance meeting. And on that, the only thing that will potentially be at risk is asset revaluations, because we're not the only ones trying to revalue our assets at this stage. So that is the problem in the market at the moment.
So it's actually finding a valuer, is that correct?
We've got valuers.
Yeah, that's
But-
getting them to come do it. Okay.
At the moment, we should be all on time, but
Yes, I can understand that had been an issue. So, members, the 27th of September is a big date for us. It's the last meeting we will have in this triennium, and we are trying to lay the foundation to be able to pass over to the new council, constituted after the 8th, obviously, some assurance so they can do the work on the 20th in terms of adopting the annual report. So it'll be based around the general principle that we will want to understand and confirm the draft annual report. That's at a group level, so that includes also the subsidiaries, and indeed our non-financial information, and form a view on those. And the second part is that we will consider what are the representations that the new council will be required to make to Derek, because I think it would be important for us particularly to pass on to the new council what our views are. So that's things like, have we maintained our systems of control through the year? Has there been an absence of fraud? We are a going concern. Standard things that go with a letter of representation. So that will become the agenda on the 27th and a key date. Note that Derek still has a lot of work to do there, but I'll clearly be obviously keen that Derek is there with us in that process as well. We're not signing off the accounts, we can't, but we need to leave the best foundation we can for the council going forward. Thank you for that. If there's no other questions, can I move to the recommendations, please? Which is that we received the report. We note the detailed plan. We note that there is ongoing communication. Thank you, Ross, for your quick update on that. And that the valuations of operational structural asset investment class, investment property and forestry have commenced. As in, we know who our valuer is. Okay.
and the work has started.
Oh, the work has started, so that's good. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Darren, appreciate that. And do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Bex. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that, and look forward to the issues being resolved as quickly as we can and your participation. Thank you, mate. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, committee members. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Right, we can move
Cheers.
back to our agenda as it was standing. So we've done item 8. We're back to item 5, which is the health and safety risk update, please. Happy to take it as read. Is there any questions that people want to raise with these?
Have the reports received?
You moved. Thank you, Rangi.
That's a question. Yeah.
Oh, you want a question, Rangi? Please,
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, my question's around the effectiveness of the due diligence site visits. You know, coming from a contracting environment, I see them as quite superficial and going through, you know, not an effective thing. You know, they might be ticking an essential box, but you know, to me, they aren't really, from what I've seen in the actual contracting world, more than a box ticker. And you know, is that enough, or?
Okay. Darren? Oh, sorry, actually, Claire, I think put a...
Well, I was indicating to Michael.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
I'm happy to speak. if
Oh,
any,
okay, right, sorry.
Yep.
So who's speaking first, sorry? Is it you, Michael?
Through yourself, Chair, you're happy to take that one on. Look, site visits are being reviewed, but from an executive point of view, we are reviewing how we undertake the site visits at the moment as well, just to make sure we're getting the full value out of that from an organisation, and making sure we're ensuring the compliance requirements are met, but also getting a fuller health and safety exposure into those site visits as well. So we're undertaking, like I say, a review of our own approach from an executive level, but we will be looking at that from how we do that with the governance level at the same time. We wholeheartedly agree with the responsibility in relation to those site visits and our requirements under the with the contractors.
I'd like to just suggest that this is on the big steel or borough premise. Wellington City are just looking at actually what should it, particularly from a governance perspective, a councillor be doing on a site visit. It's more than just going and saying g'day to somebody that's working on the site. So there may well be, your point's well made, Rangi, that actually if we're going to go on site visits, it should be with an effective and good approach to understanding what's going on. So I don't know where Wellington are on that, but out of their last health workshop, that was definitely a must-do. So Michael, that may be something I can give you the context there to see whether they've taken that forward. Darren, sorry, I think you had to do
Thanks. Yeah, look, my comment was simply going to be that surely the majority of that responsibility rests on the shoulders of the elected members to know what they need to be asking.
Look, I agree, and I think what I'm just reflecting on my Wellington experience here, Darren, was actually it's been looked at by others as to what we do as governors. So let's use what they might have if they've got a
No, I actually dispute that. There's a problem here because you walk onto a site and if you ask, if a governance person asks specific questions on PPE, on the use of machinery and stuff like this, they're crossing the line into a management thing, and that's what I'm getting at is that you could go on site and drill right down, but that's not our position. I want to know the interface between governance and management on how this works. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think we need to recognise our obligations under Section 44 of the Act. So we need to, and I think this is the point I'm saying, without getting into detail, Rangi, I'd be big borrowing staring off Wellington, for instance. That this has got to come from the perspective of a governor, but the obligation is to verify. Now, verify is a small word, but it could have a big meaning, and I think this is the value of where it's going. I hear your point that actually governance, should stay out of the fire, but actually the reality of it is this has got a specific obligation to verify. And so to understand better what a councillor should do on a site visit is important for two reasons. One, it makes it proper and valuable, but it also probably helps protect the position you're in or you're arguing, which is actually how detailed should they go. Our obligation is to understand systems and processes, and so I would be coming from a governance lens on that basis if I was on a visit. Can I say, Rangi, I think for the sake of the meeting, we've got a suggestion here. This needs to be looked at. Michael, I think you've suggested that's the case. Can we task Michael just to eventually come back to us with what is the appropriate approach a governor should take when they walk on site, Rangi?
So what I was trying to establish, are we happy with what we've currently got, or are we seeking to do it better?
Mr. Chair, I think we're always seeking to do things better. So I think that's an answer that is in the affirmative for everything.
I think so. Yes, Novi.
Agree with Rangi. I think we're very lightweight in the area of health and safety. It's too ad hoc. I've got 10 years experience as a government inspector in this area. And when you rely on committees and workplaces to analyse themselves or to look for incidents that might lead you to something a bit more serious, or you crisscross over and cross-pollinate where somebody from one committee goes and looks at another person's area, it's limited by the experience of the person to see what other people don't see. And so I think we've got a risk in that area. I've raised it before. We don't have a designated health and safety manager as such that would bring that sort of expertise. And I've investigated many accidents where people internally just get used to doing things the wrong way. And so I think we've got a risk there. I personally, even with my background, would not be wandering around council facilities and engaging. As Rangi said, I think that's the wrong approach to take. We just need assurances that the things are actually occurring and that we're getting quality in that area. And I think it's an area to grow into.
Yes, thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick note. I happen to be present at an inspection on the Steed Street Stock Bank evaluation. Rather unbeknown to me, I got co-opted into it on the time of the inspection, but I was impressed. It wasn't just an ad hoc, look at that, look at that. There was a detailed sheets, a selection of sheets and answers and questions to be looked at. It wasn't just as a wing of a prayer because on the day. It was all pre-planned with extensive documentation.
Thanks for that insight, Graham. Any other comment on this? So look, I think just a couple of things. One is I note under public excluded we have got a very good development of a risk framework. So Nobby, I think that's actually a good place to discuss what are the nature of our strategic risks, including your concern, and would be mine as well, around health, safety and wellbeing, and actually what is our approach. I think equally we've also agreed in effect to ask Michael around the issue of making certain the sort of approach that you've outlined, Graham, is one which is the most effective and is the right one that a governor should take. So I think that's, if we can hold that together, that would be a very effective way to start ramping up or being affirmed, assured about our approach around health and safety as governors. That would be great. Any other comments folk would like to make? Right. That being the case, can we move to the resolutions, please? And it is simply that we receive the update. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
No.
Those against? It's carried. Right, if we could move to the... also about to skip over working together. Item 6, please. My favourite topic, is it? So again, Michael, is this anything that you want to raise? Probably would be useful to hear your heads up, please, given this is a new task that has been given us, as you'll recall from the council decisions in whatever, May, was it? And Michael, it would be useful to get that heads up from you as to where to from here, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, atamari everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, this is the first and final report on the Working Together work stream coming through to this committee. This committee has provided the oversight of the Working Together group, and Council has resolved that the remaining risks be transferred to the Council Risk Register, and that has been completed, as you can see in the report, so that there is ongoing monitoring of those risks. This includes the internal audit of the reporting templates of staff reports coming through. This is one I've picked on because I know that that work is underway with the new internal auditor, working that up. So she's got a work program to commence with that. I think, just working through the notes Jane has given me to speak to, and I think I have covered everything there. Yes, she just wanted to note something because I've said, but it's probably worth repeating that with the legacy report being completed and the response received from the department, the work of PGG and the external appointees has concluded. Responsibility for monitoring falls solely on this committee at this time. So it was just something Jane wanted me to emphasise, and with that I'm otherwise happy to answer any questions to ensure the meeting continues to move forward.
So look, I will be interested. I'd really just had sort of how-to questions, or what are the next steps here from Michael, and one is how will we monitor those risks, and I think we can pick that up this later when we talk about our risk framework. I am interested though in the outcomes, because that was an important document to the whole program, that we are seeking outcomes here, and that is still open. Are you the guardian of the outstanding steps as far as the monitoring framework is concerned?
I would place myself as the overarching guardian. I may not
overarching guardian, good.
I may not be responsible for every specific outcome,
no,
but I will be the person who will present those through to this committee as required to make and to ensure that the team behind me all work together to make sure that these come before this committee when required and needed.
Brilliant. Now look, that's good, because I'm just conscious that actually their monitoring framework has a lot of action that should really happen post 30 June, and so that's great to know, because I'm very keen that we keep this up. Thank you for that explanation. Committee members, any questions people would like to raise at this stage? Yes. Michael, oh sorry, Tim, yes, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought this had been resolved as an issue.
So Tim, could you just be a wee bit closer to the microphone or pull it closer to you, please?
I thought this had been resolved in the public domain anyway, where it, the issues seem to be either downplayed or the outcome was not what was expected. And I think it would be better just to leave it alone for a while.
So Tim, I think it would be fair to say, from my recollection of the council meeting, that that preceded this, and hence the paper that we've got, recognise that the majority of the work had been done. We spent 18 months with Jeff and Lindsay doing the hard yards in the way that you've said. We agreed also that actually it was time for the actual program itself to conclude, particularly in that importance for us not to have the training wheels of Jeff and Lindsay with us, but that the objectives of the program and the risks were still real, and that the risk committee should monitor those, which is exactly what Michael is encouraging us, and Jane is encouraging us to do through this process. So I don't believe, in terms of the work that's been done for the last 2 years, that it's now just dropped and forgotten. We need to make certain that the gains are still maintained. The risks are that we lose them and we slip back into ways that gave rise to the original letter from the department. So we are still in the program, if you will, but it's on a different basis. It's self-managing. Are there any other questions, folk like Rangi?
My question is around the resident survey, and reading it, it sounds like they're going to use the 2022, which is this year, as the baseline against another survey. So that makes me believe that we haven't had previous resident surveys. Is that correct?
I'd have to refer to Michael.
We have had previous resident surveys. I don't believe we've had this specific question relating to the governance aspect asked before. So this is essentially that baseline in that resident survey for that specific question.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is that, okay, it shows a low, very low view of this council, but it'd be interesting to know what it dropped from previously, but obviously we haven't done that, so there is no baseline, and it is possible that we are consistent with previous views, potentially.
That's potentially absolutely correct, Councillor. Yeah. Or it also could be that we've now got a baseline,
right?
And it's now for this
not
council.
A flat line.
No, exactly.
Rang, I think this is the key thing. Look, you know, we all know that we're coming up to elections. We all know that there's a sense to which we want trust and confidence in the community. The resident survey is part of that process of us trying to assess these outcomes. So look, I accept the fact that there will have been surveys in the past. This particular question hasn't been asked before, but that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be trying to do it.
Oh no,
now going forward.
But it's you've got to place it in perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh look, agreed. I think what I was also going to reflect, Rangi, sorry, I realised that I had another point, because of course this is the key challenge that the department has left us with. How do we build the trust and confidence, given the results of the interim surveys that we've done to date is still saying there's work to do here. Thank you. Nobby.
Just two things. Rangi's quite right. The previous ones we've done and the more current ones we've done, we've changed the format of how we connect in the surveys. And one is at the expense of the other. One format is very negative. When people have an online thing, they just get in and bag off council. If you speak to them on the phone, you can actually tease through some of the issues and get a better result. So we're not really at this stage in a position to compare apples with apples. A little bit different. The other thing is the wider issue of the working together. Just the comments that Sir Tim made. and as chair of that group, we have got to sort of the end of the activity with that. We still have a couple of areas to work on. The supporting the mayor one still has some unresolved issues, and that well documented. And I think in the area of the media going forward, that Claire and Lisa have done some work not too long ago in a workshop to look at strategically where we go with our whole media function. So they're the areas that are still a work in progress, I guess.
Thank you. I agree. Which reflects the point that actually there's more still to be done, which is great. Any other comments people would like to make at this stage? Being none, I'd like to move to the motion, knowing that risks get picked up through our normal risk function, which we'll have a discussion on later in the meeting. And Michael, the overarching guardian of helping us keep on the straight and narrow with monitoring the outcomes, which should still be something that we take seriously. And thank you that you have this morning talking about the survey. So do I have a mover and second that we receive the report, please? Thank you, Ross. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion in, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Right, can we move to item 7, which the financial risk update. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Tricia, I suspect we're in your hands.
They're in my hands. So, councillors, this is the report for the March quarter, so from the period from 1 January through the 31 March. In terms of a net debt position, council has 88.3 million of outstanding debt, 45.4 million of cash and cash investments, which a 42.9 million net debt position, which is slightly higher than the last quarter. We continue to have that minor breach in our treasury policy around fixed interest in the 2 to 4 year category, which we're continuing to monitor, but at the moment fixing interest rates at that point forward would not necessarily be advised, and that's shown in the treasury report given the volatility of interest rates at the moment, and we'll continue to monitor that. That percentage is still based on our projected capital program going forward, so any reductions or increases in our capital program affect that. We are seeing some increases in interest rates, and that's split shown in the report where after the end of March we have renewed one of our long-term debt amounts, and it was significantly higher. We're at the 4%, over the 4% mark, where most of our debt currently is held at 1 or 2%. So there's a significant shift there. In terms of our debt, that we're continuing to monitor that. There's a significant move from the quarter, from the December one, mainly because MB's paid us for Stead Street. So that continues to be an ongoing control, but there's not that much more left on that project. And we are getting a lot of movement on our rates arrears. There's a new, at this time of the year is when we send any of those with arrears with mortgages to our lawyers to have the mortgagors collect the rates on our behalf, and we're seeing that number drop down significantly.
Thank you for that. Darren, I think this paper that comes to us from a risk perspective, but it comes through your committee. Is there anything you want to add to this at this stage?
No, nothing further to add on what Patricia's had to say.
Are there any other questions folk would like to raise on the report? Yes, Nobby.
Yeah, 3 things. Do the easiest one first. Patricia, you mentioned that changes to CapEx expenditure going forward in the long-term plan could influence the net debt situation. Fair to say that if for some reason we reduce our go forward expenditure and CapEx, it would have a positive effect as opposed to negative?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. The other issue is when I look back 3 months ago at the last report that we got, which is 24 March, we've got the movement between the cash and cash investments from 50 down to now down to 45. So 2 questions in relation to that. One is, what was the money spent on? And the other issue is, it seems like, and this might answer the first question, it seems like that we're now holding some other investments, and you've got them listed there as share investments, advances of loans to ICL, and loan advances to other. So they total up to about $6 million. And in the past I haven't seen that. So when we're looking at net debt, are we now including more than just cash and cash equivalents? Are we now including loans that we might have out to other entities?
answer the second part first, and you might have to remind me what the first first question was, Councillor. The loans and advances is the loan that Council agreed to provide to Invercargill Central Limited, so that's a short-term loan, so we can include that in our cash, in cash investments. And I think the share investments and the loans and advances to others have always been there, but perhaps haven't been as large.
Yeah, that's okay. That answers the first question.
And can you remind me again?
No, that answers the first question because that's where the movement is. Yep. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you for that, Nobby. Right. I just had so look. That's very useful. It does reflect. Going back to your question, Nobby, the cost of doing business is increasing, and we see that through the funding arrangements that cost us more to have in place. So I take the point that if we don't do the capex, it actually has a perverse impact on helping us retain costs, but it does have an impact on levels of service.
Well,
we have to think about that.
That's what I was alluding to, because I mean, Rangi raised at one of our recent meetings. You know, what would happen if we delayed or actually cancelled a project?
Exactly. Yeah.
Does that improve our financial position as far as debt is concerned? And it would do.
It needs to include both parts of the discussion.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
Take your point on that. Can I just ask one minor question, please? I note that we're moving. We will be moving towards our insurance renewal, and it just made me think of two things. One, I presume public liability is challenged in terms of costs. That'll be a cost that'll go up. The second one is, will the revaluation of our underground assets change our insurance? And thirdly, are we trying to get cyber security insurance, which is rare as hen's teeth?
Through you, Chair, we've already got cyber security insurance.
Wow. Okay.
So we have that. We are waiting for our brokers at the moment on our public liability and insurance. They are saying the market is challenged. That was their update from last week. So that's not what I was wanting to hear. And the revaluation of all our buildings and our underground infrastructure is also being revalued for insurance purposes, and that will affect that.
Yeah, thank you. I probably knew that. I knew what the answer was. Again, I'm just wanting to reflect from a financial risk perspective that around the sector, the issue of even insurances is starting to impact on the cost of doing business. So thank you for that. Appreciate that, Patricia. Right, that's wonderful. Oh, not wonderful. That's great. There are no other questions. I don't sense there any. Oh, there is, Rangi?
Yeah, it's a small one on financial risks, and it's going to come up later on today in our fees and everything. But the dog registrations being over 106,000, you know, and that equates to, you know, well over 1,000 animals. You know, it just doesn't seem right that it would get out to that. You know, it's just, you know, it's amazing that you'd imagine a small percentage, but that to me is quite massive. And how does it get like that?
You're talking about the outstanding debt.
Yeah, the outstanding debt. It's quite unreal.
Oh, pretty.
Kia ora koutou, through you, Mr. Chair. So we have experienced high turnover of staff in that animal control team over the past year, and the team are working with those outstanding customers that have not paid their debt. They've worked with them over that time period, but we have anecdotally noticed a number of people are finding it harder to pay for registrations, and we work with them on options that are available. Some of those include they sometimes don't want to have a pet anymore.
Well, just given the registration for a D6 dog, $65. Now, you know, the amount you spend on food for a dog is significantly way more than that. And it's just part and parcel of owning a dog. But the question I've got is, say that lapses to the next year, is that debt carried forward for the unpaid bill? And so you accumulate, or is that wiped?
No, it accumulates.
It accumulates. Right.
Thank you, Rangi. I think for the sake of time, I hear your point, and it does reflect perhaps one of the tougher of those debt balances that are sitting there in the nature of its quality. Right, can I move to the recommendations? It's a big one, and so I don't propose to read it out, other than to reflect. It is comprehensive in terms of indicating the nature of the risks that we have and the changes that have occurred. So for the ease of that, I'll move from the chair that all these motions are taken as one, and that we resolve to take them over. Second, please. Second those. Thank you, Bex. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, could we then move to, we've done the annual report, that's great, isn't it? So we'd have the quarterly performance update, please. There, Annan, how are you? Lovely to catch up with you. Highlights, please.
Kia ora Chair, kia ora Councillors. I'll take the report as read. It outlines what the performance issues are that Council is experiencing, many of them in the area of COVID. It just highlights that this is a fast moving, changing environment, and we're looking at those trends and to see which ones will rebound back. And it does highlight the focus on performance as part of the wider long-term planning process. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Appreciate that. Very clear report. Folk, are there questions folk, other committee members would like to ask about the report? Right, I have a couple. Oh, sorry, Navi.
Yep, just on page 84 of board books and page 3 of the report itself, it says forecast year-end budget. The forecast deficit will not be impacted by Council's ability to make payments. It talks about subsidies and debt as well. Not too long ago, probably within the last fortnight or so, we've had advice from the finance team that actually we were heading to a surplus this year, not a deficit. So that those two statements don't sort of run together. I just wanted some clarification on that.
I'll pass that question to the finance manager.
Yeah, good on you, Michael.
Like an All Black, well done.
Yeah. I think this comes back to the operating deficit, Councillor. That we've got a forecast operating deficit because of the nature of our capital subsidies coming in. So that is the mitigation is the subsidies will put us in a cash positive position.
So just some clarification on that through you, Chair. Previous statement also from the finance team said that that the income that we were receiving in this financial year from the government subsidies was also being expended this year as well. So does that lead us to the position that we've got some subsidy money that outweighs what we've actually expended, and that gives us some ability towards the end of the year end to make payments as it quotes there?
I wonder, I don't want to, what's the word, Nobby, stop good questioning, and I don't have trouble with you asking the question. I understand that we have a short workshop at the end of this where we would want to go through this in more detail.
Okay, that's fine.
To explain, quite frankly, the difference we have between accrual accounting and the particular challenge we have, which is that we have capital subsidy flowing through our profit and loss account, which is accrual, but we don't have the expenditure. And so we have this distinction between an operating deficit, which is our day-to-day living, versus our capital. But I think it would be good to have some, I'm going to say a diagram in front of us, and that's going to come. But Michael, you're probably going to solve everything for me in one quick sentence.
Through yourself, Chair, no, sorry, I won't be solving everything. But just given the workshop, we'll be following this. I just thought to answer the question from a public point of view, just to clarify that the expenditure is capital in nature and sits in the balance sheet side of it. Just so when Council will be looking at it, how that impacts from that perspective, but just so the public are aware, that is why with an operating surplus, it does not sit in the operating performance measures, it sits over in your balance sheet in the capital side when you spend that expenditure. That's the two, but we will work through that with council post meeting.
We are at some of the challenging end, Nobby, here of being in conventional accrual accounting versus the challenges of actually, as we're discussing here, the operating versus the capital budgets that we run essentially separately. Yes, Darren.
Next year, I just wonder if there is a degree of what Councillor Clark is asking about the reporting difference coming from the fact that we were updated during May, and this is a reporting period that ends at the end of March.
Good point. That's a reasonable comment, I think, Darren. Actually, there are probably some challenges with timing of reports getting to this committee versus what you're doing on a current basis, particularly around the annual plan, I presume. Correct? Yeah. Okay. So we will have that workshop, which will hopefully try and shed a wee bit of light as to what us accountants do, Nobby.
Yep, thank you.
You'll be dazzled by what we do, I can assure you. Right, any other questions folk would like to raise? That's a joke. I'd like to, any other questions? This is the time that I do ask Rhiannon and Patricia, CapEx at 51.9 million versus I think probably what we intended around $73 million, we're at 71%. We've had a discussion in the previous paper that does have some benefits from a debt and cost perspective, but it is the level of service perspective. So we're going to be presumably deferring capital programs. We'll roll them over, the infamous carry forwards into the new year, etc. Is this all manageable? Are our levels of service being maintained? Can somebody help me with that? I don't know whether you can, Rhiannon, or have you got a good pass?
There are specific issues within the capital program. I think that levels of service are broadly being maintained, but Patricia will have more specifics on the dollars.
I think it might be Michael actually. So there we go. We're got it out to second five now.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair, with my other hat on at the moment, looking after the PMO side of it. Look, our delivery obviously is a little bit behind in relation to that schedule, as you see with the financial numbers there. We are on track with most of our strategic projects, and that'll be highlighted in the PMO report later in the agenda. There are some challenges we have with our renewals program, with delivery, supply chain, etc. That's highlighted here in relation to that expenditure. In answer to your point around does that carry over into next year? In the renewals program, not so much. We only have so much that we can do within a year, so we don't carry a lot of that work through. The physical work needs to carry through, but the actual dollars, we can't increase our scope in there. But from perspective of our strategic projects, we're pretty much on track. There's a little bit of a delay, but not a lot. So we are continuing to go through that. I would say most of it is in the renewal space, and we are working on that as for delivery for next year.
Right. That's something which, from a risk perspective, I stress I would be just to understand how we go, because I gained the sense from reading the papers that it's the renewal program that is behind, and it's the stored up latent deferred maintenance that we can build into our underground and our generally underground systems, which worry me. So dare I say it, even with due diligence coming up or upon us over Three Waters, I think that would be an interesting point if I was looking at us. I'd be keen to know where we're at. Nobby?
Yeah, just two quick questions on page 87 of board books. It refers here to the sale of two investment properties. I just want to clarify that's Arua and Lower Esk. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Correct. And the other issue there is the withdrawal of funds from the maturing terms. Is that just what we have in the report, which is roughly 6 million that you referred to before about the loans to ICL, or is that something beyond that?
That is just us managing the cash by withdrawing term deposits rather than borrowing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I move to the recommendations then, please, which is we received quarterly report. We note that it's already been received by Darren's group, and that the process to improve performance management of the organisation, which is a component of the wider improvement process for the 2024 long-term plan. Is it right, that one? That last one? Must be. There's indeed. Right. Can I move from the chair that we pass those? Go over a second, please. Thank you, Darren. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Can we move to the internal audit and continuous improvement update, please? Thank you. So Peter, welcome.
Morning Chair, morning councillors. I'll take the report as being read. I'd just like to take the opportunity to highlight the background sections where I've taken the opportunity to highlight the benefits and importance of continuous improvement, internal audit, and how it works in with the risk management framework.
Thank you.
To take any questions on the report.
Any questions? Thank you. Look, thank you for this. Peter gives a good sense, particularly of the work going forward. And this is a very short and quick chance to work at actually, if we get these reports, particularly ones that are occurring going forward, are they the sorts of assurance that we would actually expect? Bearing in mind that I'm sure you've worked through a good process with Deloitte's on this. I don't want to also discard the fact that the continuous improvement recommendations that Peter's also working on is also listed here. Any questions for Peter? Yes, Rangi.
This is a sort of a probing question. Does it go as far at a higher level to see that council is compliant with certain acts, legislation, or is it at a lower internal level?
Sorry, which part of the report are you referring to?
Oh, I'm just talking about compliance. You know, do we comply with? There's an article here on are we complying?
Sorry, can you give us the reference, please?
Right, let's get back to it. Monitoring compliance with policies.
Yeah, what page, please? Quick.
Okay, page 89, board box.
Alrighty.
So I'm just saying, you know, from a high viewpoint, you know, compliance with Local Government Act, Waste Minimisation Act, different acts like that.
Yep.
Does that refer to that, or is that
better?
That's mainly for our internal processes and policies, councillor, on where we'll audit our animal welfare facility to ensure we're abiding by the policies and processes for our Animal Welfare Act at that level. That's the capacity and capability we have in-house.
Right. No, okay, that's been answered. Thank you.
Right, Ross, I think you had a question, sir.
Mine's just a comment saying I'm pleased to see that the Tech 1 implementation review is completed.
Yeah,
and
have a celebration, do you, Ross?
Well, it gives some comfort now.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. I just wanted to reconfirm for Councillor Pottinger's question in relation to compliance. Our policies are drafted in respect of compliance, so they cover off the acts and legislation from that perspective. And our continuous improvement process is checking that we have that compliance in place as part of that process. So by checking the policies, we're checking the compliance components. We do make sure that we're following all legislation from that perspective as part of our internal audit continuous improvement process.
Thanks for that. I've got one comment, Peter, just in terms of Deloitte work, and I'm not going to die on the ditch in this one. I look at the nature of the internal audit work relative to now particularly the long-term plan, because we're getting, even though we've got to get through an election, that's going to be a big set piece. I know we've got the annual plan to still get out of the way, and I had wondered in terms of the timing whether the major infrastructure project management review, which Deloitte have for 23-24, shouldn't be done a year earlier. I'll leave that as a suggestion. It's not critical. I would probably drop the Treasury management review to the subsequent year. Would be my view, because it would be great to have that infrastructure work done prior to us doing significant planning. Well, it will be significant done, I'm sure, before then. But as we go into the planning round of 23-24. Be a view that I'd suggest, but I'm not dying a ditch on that one.
We'll have the next draft internal audit plan coming up for the August R&A committee, so that'll be the time to make those changes, Chair.
Yeah, so look, it's a recommendation, well, it's a suggestion I make, leave it with you, but that's trying to look at this from a lens of what we we need to have in place to have assurance over to be able to adopt the long-term plan. Okay, can I move to the recommendations? Ross, I suspect you want to move this, given the second one. Firstly, that we receive and that we note that all the recommendations on Tech, and I take it you're going to move this one with you're smiling as well, which is good. Okay, do I have a seconder, please? I'll second that. Okay, let's go. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, we can move to, thank you for that, Peter. Can we move to the policy program plan update? I think around in your back. Thank you.
So once again, I'll take the report as read and just note that we're making good progress through the necessary bylaw consultations and reviews.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Questions, comments for Rhiannon or the assembled team? Yes, Darren.
Thanks, Chair. Look, several of these come up at PPP this afternoon, but Rhiannon, given that we're coming to the end of a term, are we confident that we'll be able to get these through in sufficient time?
We've planned carefully around the electoral cycle so that we will have a number of these bylaws complete before, and then the preparation work done so that we can recommence the work with the new council around those later ones like the water supply.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Rhiannon, I was interested in, on page 105. Eyes always get attracted to red in particular. I noticed asset management down to parks disposal policy, roughly broadly financial in nature, and probably a wee bit of ground to make up there. You know, for instance, things like, dare I say, keeping our sort of hands clean, things like our credit card policy, which is old by December 17. Your general assurance that things are getting picked up will include those sorts of policies as well?
Absolutely, yes. We're working with the finance team around combining some of those into a more usable document, and we're just getting through the annual plan cycle. Brilliant.
No, it's just good. I'd love to see that, and sort of following up on Darren's point, particularly. I feel like I'm being focused on auditors, but it's good for us to know that we've got those up to date, and particularly Boo, come the time to make representations to our auditors, which is good. What's the difference between a chief executive's version and a council and finance version of delegation register?
Some come from the council and some come from me.
Oh, do they? Oh, righty. Gotcha. I thought we might have had two versions of the same document, but I'm running the joke. Okay, that's good. Are there other questions folk would like to raise at this point? I'm glad you're laughing, Cleo.
The auditor will have trouble with that.
Can I move to the resolution, please, which I'll move from the chair, that we receive the report. Thank you, Rhiannon. I do appreciate that we've got this under control in this way, and note the engagement calendar for 2022 and the policy schedule. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Yes, I thought Rhiannon might have been trying to escape too quickly. Oh, this is the one that I particularly focused on before the meeting started, Rhiannon. Seriously, this was a delight to read. Because I think it's so important that even though it's technically 2 years away, we're starting to think seriously about not only delivery but also risks. So well done on this paper, but I'm in your hands, please.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So this paper is just really intended to show the progress of the teams across the various work streams in preparation for the next long-term plan. We'll note the paper provided by Invercargill, which we commissioned a little earlier than perhaps we normally would do, given the volatility in the environment at the moment and the importance of planning ahead, which we are continually monitoring in terms of key financial inputs. We're also aware of some of the big strategic issues coming up and doing the groundwork so that when the new council is in place, we can start working with them on what they want to do about those strategic issues. So that's probably all I would say in addition to the report itself.
Thank you, Rhiannon. It's a very clear report. Do we have questions or comments for Rhiannon? Yes, Nobby.
Just a number of them. On page 115, 116 of board books, we've got a list of risks there, and I just wonder whether we should also have the risk of the future of local government, which is in that time frame going forward.
Yep.
We don't have that yet, but it is something that's ahead of us. Unlikely that we'll have the status quo going forward. And just on the attached report, on page 117, seeing Leslie's not here today, I can do the typos because I like doing those. The group report talks in one of the pages about 170 on page 120, $70 to $100 a week. It doesn't say per week, but it should say that.
I assume per week.
Yeah, later on in the report it does say that.
But that would be correct, Rhiannon?
Are you talking about the Infometrics report?
Yeah, sorry, on key points on page 120. You come down 2, 4, 6.
Sorry, which bullet?
Bullet point, strong inflation over the next 2 years. And it says we'll add $70 to $100 to household essentials, but that's per week. As you go forward in the report, it does say that on page 127.
Yes, correct.
And the other reflection I would make is two things, and I have spoken to Brad Olson about the last of the two things. One is a reflection on that households will struggle with rates, so that's part of the inflationary stuff. It's not just, we're not in isolation of that. The other thing is the issue of slow tourism recovery and its impact on SIT. But what he doesn't reflect is there's actually been some degree of growth in internal tourism. So that's the grey nomads that are running around their camper vans and doing a lot of stuff that they would normally do overseas. And quite a few reports on this issue have not recognised there is some pickup there. If you talk to operators, they'll tell you that. So just a reflection on that.
So it's good to have this as a baseline, isn't it? I think.
Yep.
I don't know what your plans are, Rhiannon, in terms of how we check in on these assumptions, because clearly we'll have to as you develop the LTP, but we've got to start. So I think those are good points to keep in mind. In regard to your first issue, and I wanted to raise this, Nobby, you're quite right. At this stage, obviously, we're planning for Three Waters on our as the owner and the operator in terms of the LTP for 24-34 at this stage.
Yes, so I would just draw attention to the first risk on the risk schedule, which is around when the timing of the information on local government reforms, which relates to all of those, and the approach that we're taking in terms of trying to look ahead and respond to what we're doing. But absolutely, there's also a risk on there around how we will deal with the Three Waters reform in terms of timing and around the financial modelling, and how we are preparing essentially two approaches to enable us to respond in whichever direction we need to.
Thank you. And I also note your last risk as well, which I want to know whether that was part of it as well, which is reflecting Three Waters establishment may impact and come in. Tim, you've got a question, sir.
Yes, just I'm wondering what impact the meetings have been having on Three Waters. The speech by Peter Williams in a packed hall in Gore certainly impressed on me the likelihood that councils all over the country will change if they don't face up to the real feeling of the people in our communities.
Agree, and that's why I think Nobby, Tim and also Rhiannon are recognising from our perspective of having to deliver a long-term plan, we have to retain the Three Waters issue as a significant risk, because it's still yet to occur, even though we do have a water services entity bill in the House. So I think that's a challenge that it's a known unknown, I suppose, risking saying that, and it could still significantly affect the way the long-term plan gets done, which of course is this committee's responsibility, which is what are the risks to it. Nobby.
You just wanted to clarify that what I raised before was not necessarily in relation to Three Waters, it was in relation to the future of local government. So for argument's sake, what would happen if we had amalgamated councils here in a couple of years' time? That would seriously change how we can deliver things and what we would deliver.
Sorry, fair point, and I agree with you. And resource management reform comes in there too. Yes.
Can I just respond on that? So, Councillor, the first risk is around the broader local government reforms, and the way that we are trying to deal with that is by addressing the known themes, which is one of the reasons for the focus on community wellbeing and some of the preparation around that work to help you with the decision making in the new council. That is the approach that we're trying to take to get the information together that will help the councillors respond to that agenda.
I must say, Mr. Chairman, that Peter Williams' speech, he pointed out on 3 occasions that this council was had kept up with the maintenance on its assets and sung our praises to high heaven. And I'd like to figure out some way of expressing that.
I think that might be for a different meeting, Sir Tim. That's not for us here. We're trying to deal with the area of risks, so I suspect there's another avenue that you can raise that matter, if that's okay with respect. Our focus is on this, particularly this table around what are the challenges to it. If there's a response that is broader, dare I say it, more political, that's for a different part of council to make that decision. Look, I think we've got a great start. I did make one comment, and I risk getting into Claire's area, particularly with the pre-food, but I actually think that diagram would be great for all candidates, Claire, to understand what's in front of them if they're standing for council. And it's a tremendous diagram because it reflects 2 things. One, actually, we're organised. Well done, Rhiannon. That's what I've got to put a big uplift to. But secondly, it does reflect the real challenge of what councillors individually and collectively will be engaged in a significant way once the elections are declared. So I think that's really superb. Rhiannon, I'll be very keen that we maintain our light touch but clear focus around the risks. I wonder, as we go into this, whether the fact there might even be some traffic lights you could put down the side of a right-hand column there in terms of highlighting the trend with those risks. Are they okay? Are they raising more concern? Very happy to take them the way they are at the moment, knowing that actually those risks will change as we go through the process.
There is a more detailed risk schedule, and it would be attached later in the process.
Cracker. Thank you very much for that, Rhiannon. That's really, really helpful. Can we move to the resolutions, please, which is that we've received, we know the timeline for delivery, the assumptions around infometrics, we had a good discussion about that, the progress of the climate change working group, we haven't discussed that, but it's in there, and we note the plan for delivery and performance monitoring improvements. Again, we haven't discussed that, but it's in there as well. I'll move from the chair that we adopt. Thank you, Bex. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thanks, Rhiannon. Appreciate that. Project Management Office status update report. Thanks, Michael.
Kia ora koutou, Chair. I'll take the report as read. One thing I would like to highlight, which has changed over time, is on the dashboard that has been provided to the committee. We've correctly entitled one of the headings back to estimate to complete. That is the one that has been a focus of attention in the past. That is the looking at the worst case risk perspective from a financial risk of those projects. So we take it at the stage of the project is at and look at the highest level risk associated to that. We've had attention on one particular line in the past, and I just wanted to draw that as a risk assessment at the time the project is. You will see out to the side we've got no reds at the moment in relation to our risk register, which is good. We are monitoring some very closely, and you'll see the 2 that are in red in relation to the variation figure are both in that orange or amber light, and that's because they are being very closely monitored and worked through with the project teams about mitigation measures to try and bring that back within those signed off budgets, I would say, from that perspective. One of them obviously has gone through the annual plan process, which the mitigation measure was to look at the funding in relation to the museum project as it is listed on here. I'll leave it there and open up for questions.
Thanks, Michael. Again, very good report. Do I have questions from folk? Nobby?
Yep, a number of questions in relation to the CAB building and the museum. So I just wanted some clarification on what progress we're at to date. So I asked a question of the finance team about a week and a half ago, about how much money was going to be spent on this building in the next financial year, and I think the reply I got was about 600,000. So that there's still quite an awful lot of money there. So am I right to assume that the remainder of that money, which is the bulk of it, will be done in the following years?
Through yourself, Chair, yes, that is correct. The initial stage is still about the investigation component and defining what the agreed scope is from that within the project. So the project team is meeting on a regular basis to try and get that scope defined. Then we'll obviously go into design and then construction follows on from that. So we're quite a way off the construction component at the moment, so you are correct in that timing.
Thank you. And the other one relates to the museum, so I just want to get a handle on where we're at with the Tisbury storage facility. So at this stage we are close to getting the designation changed. And so when will we actually start getting into some shovel-ready type stuff, the physical side of it?
I think through yourself, Chair, I think that's better suited to pass that question over to my colleague who is the direct sponsor of that project, so I'll pass it over to Steve.
Kia ora, through you, the Chair. Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat that question?
Sure, just in relation to the storage facility at Tisbury. I think you've clarified recently, both you and Caroline have clarified that the designation of the land will be changed shortly. So do you, I mean, at this stage, do you have plans for the drawn up for the storage? And if you do or don't, when can we likely see some, again, activity on the site? Is this before or after the election?
In terms of the overall program, we're expecting that once the decision's passed on the 28th of June, that we'll have a briefing on where we've progressed.
Yep.
And from that point, then we would expect to see a design, conceptually anyway, within, I would say, 3 months from that period.
Okay. Thank you. So that's after the election.
It'll be around. It'll be around that election period. Yes.
And just one final question, I guess, for you, Michael, is when we are signing up some of those two projects in particular that have stages to them as we go through, I assume that in the contracts that we will have exit clauses as well.
Through yourself, Chair, it's standard procedure in relation to our contracts to go through right procurement. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Just running.
Look, I just want to get some clarity around the CAB, the extra 10 million in there. Now, that's, look, we did the long-term plan and it was 16 million. And we did that, we budgeted everything around that. Now there's this 10 million sitting there that really concerns me, because when I look at forward to make it all fit in a budget point of view, and things, as we'll be discussing this afternoon, are popping up all over the place that are making the rates increase from our projected 4%. It worries me. That's in the back of my mind. Like we talked about stage 2 of streetscape. Now, I would forego that, knowing that this is lurking in the background. Is it real or is it not real? I mean, it's just tough to make decisions when you see something like an extra 10 million there that someone's put in, and you're going, and I've been at these workshops, and I'm going, oh, this is scary.
Through yourself, Chair, I would probably answer that last point you made. It is scary. It is the nature of capital works in relation to financial estimates. They do change at the time that you are doing all of the different scoping. This one is very much in the early stages, so they need to be as cautious as possible and give the project team the best case they can at that time of estimate. So it's not going to be the best case in relation to a financial position, but it is turning around and saying this is your risk. And that's what the project's job is, project manager's job is to do up front, and say here's your risk. It is then about trying to mitigate that risk in relation to, do we want to change the scope of our projects? Do we want to seek further funding from that perspective? They are two clear options that are available, and we do that on pretty much every single project that we need to do for strategic projects, but also for our renewals project as well. We have to go through that whole process each time and at each stage gate. It's part of the rigor we're bringing to project management and ICC to make sure that we're doing that for every single project. CAB is no different to any of the others, and we'll bring them back if we need to seek funding, if the project identifies that later on. At this stage, there isn't a design that's been scoped up or finalised to be able to give you those numbers.
When does it at some stage trigger us to reflect on the LTP and say, right, we're going to have to, like even our significance policy? When does that happen? Because we're trying to be prudent, but it's very hard to be prudent when you've got all these red flags popping up.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair, that would be during our planning cycles, or you would be highlighted in a quarterly report in relation to those, and come back as separate bids from that in normal process. So there's definitely those stage gates. If it's that significant, it will be at an annual plan or a LTP timing. From this one, it is not in that position at this stage because it has not been worked through in a design perspective. I would suggest that from a timing perspective, it'll be in that position throughout the course of the next annual cycle. I would suggest it'll be in one of the quarterly performance reports that'll come up and get clarity at the next annual plan.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. I've got Nobby, then Darren.
Yep. Just two added questions to what Rangi's raised, which are important issues. From your perspective, Michael, and clarify me if I've got this wrong, but a new council could, for argument's sake, dive into the long-term plan outside those annual planning / long-term planning processes and change the focus going forward, being mindful that they would probably have to consult with the public to do so.
Through yourself, Chair, that I'd have to say that is possible to do an amended LTP under the legislation.
Sure.
And it is the prerogative of the new council to look at that.
Okay.
And it would come with a significant time frame and cost.
Correct. The time is tight in relation to that, but it's
the auditing. Yeah.
Yep. But having said that, we could pause things while we did consultation. We're not bound to a long-term plan, like Rangi's quite rightly said. When we get some eye-watering increases coming our way, which are not necessarily determined by council, they're determined by the external environment in some cases.
Mr. Chair, I think this council has been given advice that the long-term plan is an indication, not a commitment.
Okay.
And so, yes, you could.
Thank you very much. And just one final question for Steve and Michael, which is part of the report here talks about the cultural narrative on Stead Street and streetscape as well. And there's also a comment in the report that there is some degree of struggle with the local rūnaka about their resourcing and ability to help us get forward on that issue. So I just wanted some guidance that whatever's decided and whenever it's designed, what we're going to have in both those areas, that will come forward with some costings, that it's not just an expectation that it will roll forward.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, each of those contracts for works has a specific line item for cultural narrative.
Yep.
And the project teams are working in partnership with the rūnaka on the agreed scope. And some of those, especially in Stead Street, as I briefed it previously, have contractual obligations through MB and Kānoa.
Yep.
And certainly we will keep this council informed of progress.
Okay, thank you.
Darren.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's worth pointing out that with the Civic Admin building, the LTP shows a budget figure of 16 million, and whilst the potential for that to go up by another 10 is being signalled, the decision still has to come back to council, and if council says no, the cap is 16 million, then the project has to be scoped back.
Thanks, Darren. That's what I assumed was the case. So there's still a long way to go with this one before it's got any reality. Sorry, Nobby, final question?
Yeah, interesting comment, my colleague. I guess what I was alluding to in my previous comments was, while the 16's there with a flag that it could be more, which is an appropriate flag to have, I guess what I was signalling with the long-term plan options that we might have available, it might be that we actually don't commit to that 16 million until we know what the future of local government is. So that's that pausing effect and reconsider. Thank you.
And that all goes back to Randy's good paper as well, that local government reform is a real sort of shadow cast over any of our long-term planning at this stage. That's a great report, thank you, Michael. I suggest what I sense in this from the last quarter is a lot of wrangling with these projects, probably in the last quarter to get these in line in a way that they actually are. Appreciative that we've focused on the cab and the museum. They're obviously outriders, not that they're not being wrangled or under control, but actually they are significant challenges for the council, so I appreciate that. So with that, I would like to move to the recommendation, please, which is simply in this case that we received the report. Do I have a move? Thank you, Nobby. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rangi. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion in, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much, Steve and Mike. Appreciate that. Can we move to the conflicts of interest policy, please? Michael.
Kia ora. So this is a report presenting an updated version of the conflicts of interest policy to this committee for consideration and hopefully adoption. I hope it's relatively self-explanatory, so I don't believe I need to spend too much more time on it, and we'll answer any questions.
Brilliant. Important. Yes, Nobby.
Yep. Just on page 1 of the report, on page 144 of board books, there's a comment there about perceived, and I thank Darren for his guidance some time ago, and from Michael as well. That's very subjectively worded. I mean, you couldn't even be more subjective if you wanted to, and I know this is a very difficult area about perceived conflicts, but when it says perceived, it occurs when a reasonable person, knowing the facts, I don't know what a reasonable person is, would consider that a conflict of interest may exist, whether it is or is not the case. I mean, that's just so open-ended and so open to, I guess, debate amongst members. And I'm not sure how you actually clarify that. I've seen what's in the legislation because Michael's given me a very good update, and Darren gave us a good steer at the last committee on that as well. But I just wonder whether, and maybe it's beyond our scope, but maybe the government or somebody through the LG Local Government Act needs to give some clearer definition around that potentially. I don't know, just too much interpretation for me.
Michael, have you any comment you want to make on that?
No, for what it's worth, I tend to agree with Councillor Clark on this, but that is the nature of perceived conflicts of interest, and unfortunately the reasonable person, as Mr Cameron sitting behind me will well know, is a legal test that we all love in terms of law, but is unhelpful to pretty much everybody else.
And it's one where I would want to argue that we need to approach Nobby in a spirit of cooperation with one another. If we can be open about the perception of conflict, to then have an open discussion as to how that falls, may help that member make that decision. Because unfortunately, as we know, there's only one place, which is the court, that can decide whether the perceived conflict is one in reality.
Sure.
So I take your point. That's a tough area. This is again a tough policy. Any other comments for folk? Michael, just one minor suggestion, which is under supplying to Invercargill City Council. I think it might be useful to say $25,000 inclusive of GST. Always gets suppliers, unfortunately. It reflects a 1968 Act, I'm afraid, that didn't have GST when it was written, but it has been subsequently determined that it is inclusive of GST, so it's a pretty small amount these days. Right, with that, can we move to the resolution, please? I think we are in a position, Michael, to help you get this through. So it is that we receive the report and that the committee adopts the conflicts of interest policy. Thank you. Nobby, do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. I'll put the motion then, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Righty, where are we at in our agenda? We are up to the Business Enhancement Program, please, Michael.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. So this is a verbal update in relation to where we're at with our Business Enhancement Program. So it's one thing that makes me excited is trying to make efficiencies and improve the organisation for the greater outcome of public benefit, and hopefully in the longer term some financial benefit for the public as well from that perspective. From our current state in relation to that, and I apologise, it's been quite a while since we've managed to get a release of the program to the committee. We are getting very close to that position, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things that have been ongoing from our perspective in the background, so council and committee have some reassurance that we are continuing to work on our improvement activity. So we have had a project underway to look at our supply chain and what improvements we can make in there. We did the first phase when we did our financial project. We are now working through the second phase of that component, and that is going quite well. But from that perspective, that will be in full project mode as we speak, but it will be in delivery phase probably in the next about 3 to 6 months from that perspective. So that will be exciting from working with our suppliers and making some speed improvements from that perspective. The other component we're about to kick off is looking at our internal space and our people, and that is about getting the capability and systems and processes in place for our people to be able to service our public a lot easier. That hopefully will come with some, well, no, not hopefully, it will come with some efficiencies in relation to that to help our customer experience. But those two are core components for us to be able to deliver on our customer experience. We can't deliver on our improved customer experience without those two components being in place. They are those building blocks to achieve that outcome. I want to give the committee assurance that we are working in the background on that. It has taken some time to get to this stage because taken a stock take, taken a review in relation to what is in place in relation to our systems, our processes, and the way we are building the program. So we have done review of how we provide the service internally for our systems and processes, and they will be part of the report that will come back to the committee in relation to our wider program. The Business Enhancement Program is about customer first and about building a front-end improved customer services and experience. Open to questions.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Any questions, Michael? It's useful. I think it's verbal. Somewhere, as you say, I think once you've got things mapped out, there may be a paper which we can react to, but that's very helpful to have that update. I'd like to move from the chair that we receive Michael's verbal update. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. No urgent business under public that I've been advised of. So can we please move to the resolution, which is to exclude the public for a number of items that we have in front of us. I'm comfortable they should be dealt with in PX, so I will move from the chair that we do move into PX for these reasons stated. Thank you, Darren. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. I'm needing to keep myself going at a reasonable speed. I hope you don't mind that I